like to welcome all of you to, I think this is would we call this our first annual or our second annual meeting of the Maine Climate Council?
In person is our third one, Melanie.
All right, my first in person. Nice to meet you all. I'm Melanie Loisum in real life size. So this afternoon, we're going to do a real brief overview, some of the background of the statutory directive of the council. Then you're going to hear a summary of the progress report that you should all have a copy of on your table, and really want to emphasize how excited we are by the amount of progress that's been made just in the last year since Maine Won't Wait was released on December 1st of 2020. There's some pretty incredible things that we've accomplished in just the last year that everyone here in this room has some responsibility for. So thank you all for that. We're going to talk about some of the money that we managed to secure and direct to support the work that we've been doing, which is just incredible. I think a year ago, we couldn't have hoped to have the kind of funding in front of us that we do now to help support our work. And then after we do a summary on the progress report, we're going to break you up into groups, which thank you very much for finding some friends at your table. And what we're going to want you to do is talk to one another about what we've accomplished and what you think there is ahead of us that we need to be focused on. So rather than us just talking at you all day, we'll give you a chance to do some talking to one another and then report out to the group at large. Next slide. Keep going. But first, I'd like to introduce our two new members of the Maine Climate Council. You've met Dr. Arnold already, our newest co-chair to the Science and Technical Subcommittee. As a marine scientist at the Island Institute, Susie works on the impacts of climate change and ocean acidification on marine resources and fishery-dependent communities. Susie earned a master's degree in marine biology and a doctoral degree in marine biology from the University of Maine. So welcome to the Alumni Center. Noel Bonham, who is not able to join us today, is Maine AARP's state director. Noel brings extensive experience in leadership development, stakeholder engagement, diversity, equity, and inclusion practice, and civic leadership. Before joining AARP, he had been the head of the Global Institute. Noel holds a master's in public personnel management from Osmania University in India and a certification in diversity, equity, and inclusion in human resources from Cornell University. Next slide. So just a reminder, a year ago today, the Climate Council delivered the 4-year plan, Maine Won't Wait, a plan for action to tackle climate change in Maine. That plan includes strategies to help us reach the state's emission reduction targets, to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions 45% below 1990 levels by 2030 and 80% below 1990 levels by 2050. In addition, Governor Mills has established a statewide goal of achieving carbon neutrality by 2045. And then overall, while we're working on reducing emissions, we're also charged with finding ways to make the state more resilient to the impacts of climate change that are happening today that you've heard some about already. Next slide. So in Maine Won't Wait, there were 8 overarching strategies. I'm not going to reiterate all of them to you. I think you've heard them many, many times. And like I said earlier, I'm really excited by the progress that we've made. I think you're going to hear this afternoon about action that's being taken to address each one of these strategies, and work that we'll be doing moving forward as well. Next slide. And so here you see on the left, last year's Maine Won't Wait report, paired with today's progress report on the action that's been taken that you all have a copy of, that is also available on the website for the Climate Council. With that, I'll turn it over to Director Pingree.
Thank you, Melanie. And Melanie again is here. We kind of forgot our history. We've spent so long together with Melanie on Zoom. This is her first in-person meeting of the Maine Climate Council. Again, this is the 3rd in-person meeting of the Maine Climate Council, and we are navigating this new world of Zoom and Climate Council. So hopefully we are incredibly grateful for all the folks who are technologically making it happen on our team, University of Maine's team, and elsewhere. But again, bear with us because I think it will include some bumps. We have a couple presenters who are going to be on the Zoom screen. A lot of us who are here live. So again, this is a whole brave new world. So as Melanie said very eloquently, we are excited to be here on this day. Again, for those of you just tuning in, we actually kicked this day off at the University of Maine at 11:30 with a press conference with Governor Mills. She made a couple of announcements. She talked about the progress we have made to date, and that is really the subject of our meeting today, where we are and how we continue to move forward in the next 3 years of this plan. I will say Tony Ronzio on our staff, there's nothing more that he loves than this MDI school bus, which is the cover of our progress report. As the governor also talked about at the press conference, MDI has the first electric school bus in the state of Maine. They have an absolutely awesome bus driver who helped make that happen. And so this cover, again, the first bus is really emblematic of where we are. So going to the next slide. So hopefully you've seen, and it's now, I believe, on our website at maine.gov/future. You can find the climate progress report, our 1-year plan. I will just say that the progress that we have made is really because of many staff across state government, many nonprofit and partner institutions, scientists, as well as communities who are helping us implement this work. The governor recognized Efficiency Maine, one of our key partners in this work, but there are agencies across state government who are really making this happen. So when we met about a year ago, we had this very bold plan. We approved it unanimously as a climate council. And here we are a year later to see how far we've come. I will say that one of the big headlines of today is that a year ago, we had very bold and ambitious plans, and we were trying to figure out how to marshal the resources, the money to do it. And I think the good news a year later, and as you'll see in some later slides, and you'll certainly see in this progress report, unprecedented funding from the Maine legislature, from the federal government, other major legislation under consideration in Congress with the Build Back Better Act. So an unparalleled amount of funding now to help us make action happen. So we also talked a year ago about accountability and transparency, and how can we be accountable to our goals? How can we make sure that this plan isn't just a plan that state government produces that sits on a shelf, but that we are every year reporting on how we are doing and the progress we are making. And this dashboard, which we are announcing today, is in the progress report. It will soon be on our websites across state government. This is our Maine Won't Wait tracking dashboard. We may add more indicators over time. There are several agencies working on how to really collect some other pieces of data that we may be missing, but these are really the high level, big deal things that we talked about in the plan. So the first couple are about reducing our emissions. We talked a lot about transportation. We have our sort of high level thing is we need 210,000 EVs on the road by 2030. And the good news is it's a small number, but we are making progress. We've seen a 90% increase in EVs on the road since 2019. And due to the hard work of Efficiency Maine and others, we now have 62% more charging stations. I can tell you as an EV driver who just drove to New York City last weekend for the Thanksgiving break, Maine is doing a great job expanding EV charging. We're bringing it to more rural parts of our state as well. And the rest of the entire East Coast needs to catch up. So one of the other important measures we talked about in the climate plan was per capita spending on public transit. We've got Commissioner Bruce Van Note, who may also speak to this. But as we did some calculations, we actually found out that Maine is doing pretty well. We're at $11.55 per capita on public transportation spending. That's about midway through the country. We have some good news on additional funding that's going to help us up this number. The governor loves this statistic and it's great news. Maine has 40,000 new heat pumps installed since 2019. That's on the way to our 100,000 heat pump goal. We have more heat pumps than this installed. We're just talking to Michael Stoddard about how to update this number. More than 80,000 are in people's homes, but more than 40,000 towards that 100,000 goal. Really good news. A big and important thing as we go into a cold winter is homes weatherized. So more than 2,000 homes weatherized in 2021. We have a big goal to get to 17,000 by 2025. The governor has made a couple of announcements about additional funding for weatherization. The federal government has also sent more money for low-income weatherization. So lots of work happening at Efficiency Maine, Maine Housing, and other places about how to ramp up home weatherization, because we know Maine, as you'll hear later from Dan Burgess, is incredibly oil dependent. So weatherizing our homes, making them less leaky is a big deal. So you're going to hear a little bit more about our new community resilience program. And the governor set a goal of 100 communities in this program by 2023. So this is a new metric. We talked about partnering with towns. We announced this partnership project today. You'll hear more about it from Brian and Brett. But we set a goal of 100 communities by 2023. So I will say, if you're out there in a community, please dig into this program, help us meet this 100 community goal. Obviously, we have nearly 500 municipalities in the state of Maine, so we want to keep ramping that up. And that's one of the things I think the council should probably continue to talk about. How do we get everybody into that mix? We are on the path to 80% clean energy by 2030. So Maine has an RPS goal. Dan will show you some stats on that, but Maine will reach 45% by 2021. We are among the most aggressive in the country. So that's good news, required in law, and we will be at 45% this year. The governor also set a goal of 30,000 clean energy jobs by 2030. So Maine had a little over 14,000. Some jobs were lost during the pandemic, but many are being regained as we see new solar installations, new energy efficiency installers around the state. So we are headed in the right direction, and a lot of focus from the community colleges to our CTEs on how we can get more people into these industries. We set a goal of 30% land conserved by 2030. The state's at 20% right now. That's a number from 2019. That's a number we're trying to figure out how to make sure we can keep updated. It's a lot of work to crunch those numbers. But you'll hear from Judy Camuso and members of the Land for Maine's Future Board about new funding that will allow us to start moving in the right direction in this area. And I will say the ultimate judge of our work and the progress of Maine Won't Wait is the DEP biannual emissions report. And Melanie and her team do an incredible job. They're waiting for the last bits of data to come in from the federal government, but we will soon have our most recent emissions reduction number. Maine has been on the right trajectory. Our emissions have been going down. So we will know in just a couple of months. That's really the ultimate measure. So I would just highly encourage you all to dive deep into this report. I will say that we have reports on each of the 8 strategies, the kinds of things that are happening in state government, the specific studies that are happening, the new funding. Folks put a lot of time and effort into the full update, but I'm not going to reiterate it all here for you today. We want to get into a couple of deep dives onto new and exciting initiatives, and we also want to hear from all of you. So with that, next slide. We are going to hear a couple of strategy updates. So we're going to hear from Brian and Brett in our Governor's Office of Policy and Innovation in the Future on the launch of the new Community Resilience Partnership, our program to really partner with Maine towns on both reducing their emissions and preparing for climate change. We're going to hear from Commissioner Bruce Van Note from the DOT on the launch of the Infrastructure Adaptation Fund. And a lot of the other exciting news from DOT, they are getting a lot of money in the new infrastructure and jobs plan from the federal government, and that really is going to allow us to accelerate our work. We'll hear from Commissioner Judy Camuso from IF&W about Land for Maine's Future and how they're incorporating climate in their work and a new $40 million investment from the state budget. And we're also going to hear from Commissioner Amanda Beal about the wrap up of the Forest Carbon Task Force. And then last but not least, I think the Climate Council has been very interested in how we better engage Maine people across the spectrum, whether they be young people, businesses, communities or others. So we're going to talk about the launch of the Maine Won't Wait website and engagement campaign, which starts today. We have a little video starring some people in the state of Maine and in this room. And then we're going to go on to a deeper dive with Dan Burgess after that. So I will first ask Brian from our team to come up, followed by Commissioner Van Note.
Thanks very much, Hannah. And thank you all for being here this afternoon. As you heard the governor say earlier, the state's biennial budget includes $4.75 million for supporting community climate action on clean energy and adaptation. And so today, GoPIF and GEO are super excited to launch the Community Resilience Partnership. The partnership was developed with input from communities, supporting organizations, and in coordination with state agencies. Importantly, it expands upon the Community Resilience Pilot Project that has been running for most of the year, currently helping 8 communities around the state, from the Crown of Maine to the lakes to the coast, take action on their climate priorities. The new program will provide grants directly to communities, regions, and tribes for planning and action so they can be ready for larger federal and state funding opportunities. The partnership will also provide capacity building to service providers who support communities in planning, locating funding, and implementing their priorities. A new website describes the program and can be found on the GoPIF webpage, maine.gov/future. That website is live now, and the grant opportunities for both communities and service providers are live today. We'll be accepting, yeah, very exciting, thank you. Applications for those grant programs will be accepted in the first quarter of next year, with various deadlines for the different grant programs. GoPIF will be hosting informational webinars on December 14th for all of those grant programs, and the registration links again are on the maine.gov/future website. We look forward to supporting communities in Maine with this program and to building a better future for Maine with all of you. And I'm happy to welcome Commissioner Van Note to talk about another new exciting program.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am indeed honored to be standing at the Alumni Hall at UMaine. I'm a proud Black Bear graduate. How I got here was very quick but meaningful story. Back in my day, which is more decades, I'd like to admit, when you went to a high school guidance counselor, the whole process lasted about 90 seconds. They took a look at your transcript and they go, "You're good in math and science, okay. You got any money? No. Undecided engineer, UMaine. Next." And I enrolled as an undecided engineer at UMaine, and that has led me. That was the best quick decision that ever happened. In the years since, it led me to become a surveyor, a lawyer, and then play with some policy stuff and legislative things. And so I stand before you today, an undecided engineer. And very proud to be here, but I definitely wouldn't be where I am without the University of Maine. So I thank the president and everybody here. I also want to thank Hannah and Melanie and the entire team at GoPIF. Joyce Taylor, who couldn't be here but should. She's our chief engineer. The very first thing I did when I was nominated, seriously, the very first thing I did was I called Joyce and said, "Joyce, what? You're going to be helping me with climate." And back then she was, "What do you mean?" Second call was to your predecessor, Melanie, so I could try to figure out, because I've been at DOT before and I'm comfortable with the traditional things that DOT does, but I knew we were going to be learning a whole new thing and we needed to get dedicated top staff, and Joyce was that, and Taylor's here. Without him, I'm not standing here either. So thanks for that. What I'm really here for is the Infrastructure Adaptation Fund. This is a $20 million program over the next couple of years that came from ARP money. It's to support municipalities, tribes, and state agencies with resiliency projects that relate to climate. It's going to fill gaps where others there are a lot of projects that just don't fit right in other programs, and this is going to fill those gaps. projects eligibility is generally been blessed, but it will be project specific as we go on. Kinds of things that we'll be looking at are stormwater, wastewater type projects. It could be as simple, the engineer part of me, as a backflow valve at a wastewater treatment plant that is unbelievably important when the water's rising. So those kinds of things. DOT will be administering the program. We're kind of the public works unit of the state, and the eligibility will be posted. It's on a website now, the basic eligibility requirements under DOT grant programs, and we expect to be taking applications in April. So the money's real. We look forward to solving problems with future applicants. As Hannah mentioned, that's not the only money that's on the horizon. I don't know if you know, Hannah, but they put a new label on the IIJA. They now call it the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law Bill. So that's a little easier to roll off anyway. But there's a lot of exciting things in that. Part of it is stuff for exactly this. Under our Protect program, Maine will be getting a new formula fund, which is guaranteed money of about $6.8 million per year for the next 5 years for these kinds of things. There's also a discretionary grant program for the exact same kind of thing. We don't know how much money we can get from that. It's a new grant program, hasn't been stood up, but it's $1.4 billion over the entire nation over the next 5 years. So there's opportunities there. And I can't, talk about that bill and climate without mentioning the new formula funds, about $6 million a year for EV charging, carbon reduction. I mean, that is, you look at all the math on where greenhouse gas emissions are coming in transportation, electrification of the personal fleet is key. And as Anna said, charging stations is key to that. So there's a lot of, those two are brand new funds that DOTs haven't had before. So we're excited with the potential and look forward to partnering with municipalities and all those who want to work on resiliency. So with that, I'm all set.
Just finding Judy in the ether. Is she out there? There she
Here
is.
I am. I'm here. Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, great. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm Judy Camuso, Commissioner of Maine Fish and Wildlife, and I'm sorry I can't be with you in person, but I'm very pleased that we could make this work so that I could be there virtually. I am on the Lands for Maine Future Board along with Commissioner Beal and Commissioner Kelleher. Pat Kelleher is actually the chair of the board. And today I'm going to just give you a little background on LMF and some of the climate initiatives. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things my agency is working on with regard to LMF and climate. But I assure you that DMR and ACF have a whole host of other initiatives that they're working on as well. So for those of you who are maybe don't know or are new to the LMF program, the program was established in 1987. It provides grant funding to state agencies, towns, and land trusts for conservation of lands for their natural and recreational values. To date, the program has granted about $100 million and contributed to the conservation of more than 600,000 acres across Maine. These properties include farm, working waterfronts, and water access sites, as well as large forest tracts, areas of high biodiversity, resilient landscapes, habitat for endangered, threatened, and species of concern, opportunities for marsh migration, and land corridors important for maintaining connectivity. Since 1987, LMF has been addressing Maine's climate goals and resiliency needs, though specific efforts to address climate needs have been incorporated into the program recently. Next slide. Recent changes to the statute direct LMF to, among other things, prioritize projects that help ecosystems, wildlife, and natural resource-based economies to adapt to climate change. In October, LMF adopted climate scoring criteria to address this directive. Scoring criteria included, and they are awarded up to 5 points maximum for climate change adaptations. And those kind of criteria are the amount and extent of the property that ranks above average for resilience, the extent and type of underrepresented geophysical settings found on the property, the role that the project plays in facilitating long-term movement of plants and animals based on the relationship to the surrounding landscape as demonstrated through the Nature Conservancy's regional flow model or other similar data, the project size and proximity to other protected lands. Other benefits of the project, such as flood hazard mitigation, marsh migration, blue carbon sequestration, will also be considered. The LMF scoring criteria has been informed by the Open Space Institute's climate resilience scoring criteria. Next slide. The Department of Fish and Wildlife, IFNW, is currently working with our conservation partners through the Beginning with Habitat program to designate new and improve existing focus areas of ecological significance across Maine. Focus areas host exceptional overlapping biodiversity values. So think areas that have high concentrations of unique rare plants, animals, and natural communities, many of which are at risk of decline from habitat loss and changing climate. Protecting these biological hotspots using non-regulatory tools such as targeted land conservation will help ensure that we have reservoirs of resilient populations that are better prepared to adapt to the coming climate changes and challenges. These revised focus areas will serve as the basis for landowners, land trusts, and municipal planning outreach efforts by the department and others. Focus area revisions were partly driven by new biodiversity data inputs, mostly from IFNW and Maine Natural Areas Program, as well as an attempt to address long-term habitat resiliency by better incorporating landscape context, aquatic resources, and connectivity. Projects located in focus areas are considered and favored through the LMF grant process. Next slide. Also, this past legislative session, LD 404 was implemented. This is an act to conserve deer yards or deer habitats. And that's bill directed to the department to work with the LMF staff to try and protect deer yards in northern, western, and eastern Maine. And LMF program will give preferential consideration to certain projects that meet the department's consideration for deer yards. And I'll talk a little bit about what those are, but the department is also required to own and or manage those properties. And so some of those criteria for deer yards are what of most interest probably to this group are the size of these parcels. And so for deer yards to be successful in general, we're looking at whole landscape size projects. So a minimum of 500 acres, but certainly much larger than that. And we'll be looking to incorporate things like riverine corridors, so travel corridors and areas when deer first kind of coming out of the deer yards in the spring, they need areas to feed. So sort of a mixture of a softwood and then hardwood cover for use in the spring. And so we think that these are really going to be valuable, not just for deer, but for all the other wildlife species that occupy these large areas, as well as helping us meet many of our climate goals. Next slide. So this past year, Governor Mills and the legislature appropriated $40 million to the Lands for Maine Future program. This is the first time that this program has received an appropriation of money through the budget process. In the past, it's always been through a bond. So this was an enormous shift and show of support for the LMF program and all that it can do to help climate. And I think it's important to note that the LMF process really requires, or it takes advantage of matching dollars. So that $40 million allocation of funding is likely to generate projects, in excess of $80 to $120 million. And so, the plan is for $10 million a year over the next 4 years. 75% of those funds will go to conservation and recreation projects. And that's to include both statewide significant and community conservation projects, 10% to farmland, 10% to working waterfronts, and 5% to water access. And so we really believe that this investment in the LMF program is going to help considerably the state. It's going to help the state reach our climate goals. That's all I have. Thank you.
Great. Okay, I'll jump right in. Well, nice to see you all from afar. And like Commissioner Camuso, I'm sorry I can't be there today with you all, but very exciting to be celebrating this wonderful occasion. I am going to talk about the Forest Carbon Program Task Force, and I'm going to touch also on a couple of other initiatives that connect to Maine Won't Wait, and link back to some of the discussions and the recommendations that came from the Natural and Working Lands work group, which most of you know was co-chaired by myself and Tom Abello from the governor's office. And we had a nice big group of about 25 members and some really robust discussions. And I will say we have our next meeting coming up on the 17th of December from 1 to 3 p.m. if anyone's interested who isn't on that working group that wants to listen in. So I also want to say up front that really what I'm about to present is just a snapshot of a lot of different activities and a lot of different initiatives that are going on with staff across the natural resource agencies at the state, and stakeholders that are engaged with this work, as well as all of the agencies and departments of the state. But just wanted to say that this really is just a drop in the bucket. But not to minimize the work, because it's been really a lot of good work by people who have been involved, and particularly, so I'll start with the Forest Carbon Program Task Force. These first 2 paragraphs here, these are numbers you all have seen before. I'm sure you've memorized them. Maine is, 89% forested. And we know that our forest economy is really important to our overall economy, as well as to our everyday way of life in so many ways. And so the other piece here that is important to just highlight is that our forests sequester an amount of carbon equal to at least 60% of our state's annual carbon emissions. And that figure rises to 75% when durable forest products are included. So the governor created by executive order the Forest Carbon Program Task Force. And this was a recommendation that came through Maine Won't Wait. And it aims to develop a voluntary program for small to medium-sized woodland owners in Maine who want to utilize their land for long-term storage of carbon emissions. Next slide, please. And so the task force was established in January of this year, and we were tasked with really looking at ways to develop incentives to encourage forest land management practices, particularly for woodland owners of the 10 to 10,000 acre size, while maintaining overall harvest levels. And again, this task force was co-chaired by Tom Abello and myself. We had 13 members that participated, additional members that participated in the task force, spanning representation from agriculture and forestry practitioners, industry groups, and nonprofits, University of Maine, Forest Service, Inland Fish and Wildlife, and other perspectives. And I'm very pleased to say that we have produced a final report that has been sent to the governor, and we have a subset of the task force that is going to be meeting with her in the next couple of weeks to have a discussion about the recommendations. Next slide. And so I don't have a lot of time here, so we will absolutely make this report available to all of you, and you can read it at your leisure. But just very high level, here, the executive order really laid out sort of 9 directives, and that helped us created a framework for our discussion and the recommendations that we put forth. And just sort of very high level, the actions that we talk about in the report are really in service to our overall climate plan. And this is just not an exhaustive list at all. So I hope you will dig into the report. But some of the actions that we highlight are the need to increase investment in forest land conservation, to encourage, promote, and incentivize the voluntary adoption of climate-friendly forest management practices, to promote the expansion of markets for low-grade wood, and to increase significantly technical assistance to landowners by expanding the Maine Forest Service capacity and engaging licensed consulting foresters, because we know that one-on-one research is really impactful. Increase alignment with federal funding programs that support forest carbon sequestration efforts. Explore partnerships with a private entity or entities to support the development of a voluntary credit-based and/or practice-oriented carbon program, and to promote climate-friendly timber harvesting practices and support the use of low-impact harvesting equipment. And next slide. And so the 2 other initiatives I'm going to quickly touch on. We've also had an agricultural solar stakeholder group that's been meeting. This was also a result of the recommendation that came out of the Natural Working Lands Working Group to create a process to explore the intersection between land use and renewable energy development. We know that we have some strong goals around renewable energy development, and solar is a really important piece of that. And we also have goals around increasing the amount of Maine-grown food that's consumed here in Maine. And we believe we can have both of those, we can meet both of those goals, but it definitely requires some thoughtfulness. And so we've been having some good discussions in this group as well. It's been co-chaired by Nancy McBrady. She is the director of our Bureau of Agriculture, Food, and Rural Resources within DACF, and Selena Cunningham of the Governor's Energy Office. And this work group has included 13 additional members representing agriculture, conservation, renewable energy developers, municipalities, and others. And they began meeting in June 2021. And I think they do have one more meeting in December, and they'll be finalizing their recommendations that they will present back to the legislature in January of 2022. So those are 2 big bodies of work that it's really exciting that we are ready, just about to present to everyone. And the last thing here, the soil carbon study. This is something that we talked about quite a bit during the Natural Working Lands group as well, and it manifested in a bill that was put forth in the 130th legislature. It was presented by Representative Osher of Orono, and it requires DACF and DIF&W to work together to develop recommendations to establish programs and policies to promote and incentivize practices that increase sequestration of soil carbon on both natural and working lands. And this group is co-chaired by myself and Tom Abello again. And we've been starting to meet DACF and IF&W, and we are getting ready to do the work that will engage numerous partners and stakeholders over the coming months. Our timeline for this particular study is we have a interim report due to the legislature in March of next year, and then a final report that we will aim to submit by September 1 of 2022. So that's been keeping us busy. And I just want to end here by saying how much I and we all appreciate the high level and high quality engagement that folks have, come to the table with these 3 initiatives in particular, and across the board. I know there are lots of other things going on, but we've really seen a real dedication of the stakeholder and task force members, and also participation by the public in all of our meetings. And I think that's made for a better end product on all fronts. So thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Tony Ronzio, Deputy Director of GoPIF. I get the pleasure of leading climate communications for the plan. And I'm happy to announce today that we've done a lot of work over the last 6 months to try to talk about our climate action plan in a way that ties the strategies, ties the ideas, ties the objectives, ties the kind of elevated hopes we have for the plan to real concrete actions that's happening across Maine right now. So if you, for those viewing in from home or wherever they are, or from your devices in the room, if you type in mainewon'twait.org into your device or computer or browser, you'll see our brand new website that's dedicated to the climate plan. And it is like a little bit of a different look and feel than the lovely curated reports that we provide. It's meant to be more for public consumption, and it's meant to do a couple of key things. One is really give people a roadmap for what they can do in their own lives or businesses or communities to take some climate action right away without having to read a big report or divine it or find another resource. Over the last 6 months, we've done a lot of discovery. Some of you have been part of this. We did focus groups. We did conversations with folks about what we really need to be talking about. And one of the best conversations that we had was with Dr. Shaw, because I said, hey, you're a pretty good communicator. What's your secret? And he said, tell people what they need to do and tell it clearly and distinctly and briefly. Give them 3 quick things that they need to do to take action. And we took that to heart. So if you visit mainewon'twait.org, you'll see actions for businesses, actions for communities, actions for people, simple and direct to try to fulfill the objectives of the climate plan. Hit the next slide for me, please, Adam. So that's the major part of our update today. And this website, which was developed with a consultant, Kate Howe from Better Yet Media in Portland, is really our effort and going to be a launching point for some of our outreach efforts over the next 6 months, and then hopefully beyond. And our goal is to use the website as an entry point for people that are just on the cusp of taking a climate action, but don't even know they want to do it yet. Because what we found in a lot of our discovery is that because of the great science work from folks like Dr. Arnold and Dr. Fernandez, because of a lot of the weather and everyday effects of life and climate change that people are seeing and can't ignore, that they're aware of it, that denialism is no longer the problem that we're trying to solve. It's just pushing people a little bit up that road to say, like, do that one thing, do that next step in their process. And that's what the new website is really meant to do. We have a video series planned for the next 6 months. The first one's available today. Kathy, you know this because you're all over Twitter today. It's already being shared widely by a lot of groups, but we're going to show it to you here in a second. And I want to thank Bruce Van Note for allowing Taylor to be in it because she is the star of the show. And so that video is out. We've got 3 more that will be circulating again through January, and Blackfly Media from Portland has been really great to work with and did a great job with the first one. We have some public outreach that we're going to be doing about this in line with the campaign. We're going to do it with some partner organizations. Our hope is, as always, to do as much of this in person. We feel like there's a lot of great opportunities for in-person event, in-person engagements, but also recognizing that we're having a great deal of success today with hybrid events. And so we'll do what we can. But hopefully to work with a lot of partners to get our message out to various audiences that are interested, able, want to know more, but maybe not have been engaged at a high level just based on the plan. And then in that vein, Hannah and I and everybody in the office were exploring the potential of holding a state climate summit or conference this May. Now, a lot of things have to align to be able to have something like that, but we've held a date. We're going to plan for it because I do think there is a real galvanizing and catalyzing effort from getting everybody together to talk about this all at once in the same room and try, as opposed to trying to do it asynchronously, which worked really well in 2020. But I think the more opportunities we can get, disparate viewpoints, disparate communities, disparate voices in the room to talk to one another about what's happening with climate, we can create some unity and create some momentum for action. So that's our plan for the next 6 months. You'll be hearing a lot from us. And I also want to thank my colleague, Dr. Rose, who joined me on the communications front and has been invaluable with her expertise, energy, and love for this stuff. So thank you very much, Cassie. All right. So I'm going to close this section of the program with a short film. So Adam, if you would, roll it.
If you haven't felt the effects of climate change, you will.
It's changing the entire planet, Earth. We live in a tiny place called Maine.
The natural resources that we have are what make Maine, Maine.
We live off it, we're fishermen, we're farmers, we're foresters.
Who doesn't want to have a job where you can see this every day?
A lot of people see climate change as like, oh, this is, a problem for the next generation.
It is not a problem of tomorrow, it is a problem of today.
It has the impact of changing life as we know it.
When I was a kid, this might have happened once every 10 years. Now you can pretty much count on it happening every year.
We're seeing water on sections of roads that we hadn't seen before.
Drought, erratic frost dates, more extreme storms.
The ski season's changing, ice fishing season's changing. All those things are changing right now.
The thing about climate change is that it is directly threatening the things that we love about Maine.
When I was a little kid and I would go out lobstering with my dad, we were just nailing lobsters hard.
I have traps I can show you that have stuff growing on them that I've never seen before.
The Gulf of Maine is warming faster than 99% of the world's oceans.
Climate change isn't just something that happens on the coast. This is not just about sea level rise. This is about, in our case, not enough water.
Actually, 2 moose out here. Moose can have between 30 to 90,000 ticks on them. When we recover that animal, it's lost 30% of its body weight and it's dead. And that's because of the impact of winter tick.
In Maine, transportation emissions are 54% of overall state emissions.
We've always had really strong farming and forestry and fishing industries. In order for those industries to continue to thrive, we need to focus on climate change now.
We're writing a history right now for Maine that we will be ready. We're going to be a state leading.
It's really important for climate change not to be seen as something that we have to pay for. It's also an opportunity for us to participate in the economy in a new way.
There's 1.3 million people in the state of Maine. There's only 6% of us that benefit from heat pumps.
Maine is setting an example for other states to set bold climate goals.
Buildings have to save energy to address climate change. When we're up at full production, we're employing more than 100 people. Those are 100 good paying jobs in a community that is a couple thousand people. That has a multiplier effect that is massive.
This is one of the first community solar farms built in Rumford. Having a solar farm or wind power are going to allow us to increase our tax base, and we're going to keep that money here at home where it belongs.
Framing the climate crisis as a social issue rather than a scientific issue, especially for younger folks, is critical.
This feels like a team project where we all need to contribute. I felt like this was one way that I could make a difference.
We hope we can do something about it.
The next 10 years are really important.
What Maine Won't Wait is trying to do is to say, here's what you can do about this. And by the way, they're gonna help save you money.
We're just trying to find common sense ways to help people take action. We are seeing businesses and towns follow the governor's lead. They're not waiting, and that's exciting.
If we want to continue to have the state that we all love and cherish so much, we need to act now. Maine cannot wait.
Go team. Big thanks to Tony and Cassie and others who helped make that happen. So we're going to have a discussion this afternoon, but we have sort of 2 more pieces of information. We've had, well, Ivan and Susie brought us some pretty stark science news. Dan has some uplifting, exciting energy trends, but also we'll talk about where Maine is and just some pretty significant challenges and why this work is so important. So I'm going to bring up Dan Burgess for an energy overview that I think will help set the stage for this afternoon's conversations.
Thanks, Hannah. Thanks for having me follow the inspirational video with this. That's great. Appreciate that. So I'm Dan Burgess, Director of the Energy Office. Next slide. How are we doing on time? We're still good? Okay. So I wanted to set some context. If you've read the newspaper or paid a energy bill or are planning your to pay energy bills, you have no doubt seen that we are experiencing higher prices. There are a number of reasons for that that I want to put into context. So the U.S. Energy Information Agency put out their winter fuels outlook, which shows that our reliance on fossil fuels globally is really setting the cause. We're at near or multi-year highs in the U.S. We're seeing increases around the world. There's a number of different reasons for that, but at a very high level, we experienced the extreme lows during the pandemic. The economy was kind of in a place where we weren't using as much. The supply of fossil fuels was down. And therefore, as we begin to come out of the economic situation caused by the pandemic, supply has not kept pace with demand. So we are going to be spending more on energy this winter. That is not just here in Maine, not just here in New England, but around the world. That is not the reason for that is not because of renewable energy policy, though some would like to say it is. It is because of our over-reliance on fossil fuels. So as we think about the pace, what's ahead of us, it's important to keep that in mind. That is not to say that we should just over-incentivize renewable energy, right? We need to be very careful about how we do this. Have to be very careful about the transition to ensure that we are not negatively impacting Maine people and businesses, and particularly those that can least afford that. Next slide. Next slide, please. Great. So three slides here, which I think help paint the picture of Maine's situation when it comes to home heating. So the chart on the top left is, these numbers are from 2019. We're going to get new numbers for 2020 pretty soon, but they're going to be similar. 60% of Maine's homes, that's the orange piece of the pie, rely on oil for their home heating. So 60%. The next would be natural gas, followed by or propane, natural gas, and then electricity. So a little bit of good news in that. That used to be closer to 70. That is now at 60%. On the bottom, that is a chart of every state in the country and their reliance on fuel oil consumption in residences. Maine is the green triangle all the way to the right. So we are by far and away the most heating oil dependent state in the country, 60% of our homes utilizing home heating oil. Not a place we necessarily want to be first in if we are here to talk about climate change, but also about being reliant on fossil fuel prices, the global market, OPEC, all of those things. So we are the green triangle. The orange boxes are actually the other New England states. So this is not we are in company here in New England. But you can really see we are an outlier. And that is highlighted by the top right chart. You can see the bar that says fuel oil. So we are at, Maine is the blue bar, 60%. The rest of the country, the average is 4%. So not only are we leading, we are an extreme outlier. So when you think about the opportunity that presents and the position that we are in, it is why we are incentivizing heat pumps at the rate we are. And I think why people are reacting well to them, because we are so reliant on home heating oil. There is a real opportunity to do more about it. Next slide. So as we talk about prices in the heating space in Maine, our office conducts, supported by US DOE funding, we conduct weekly during the heating season surveys of dealers across the state. And so these charts go back to 2010. The top left, you can see that is the average monthly price for home heating oil in the state of Maine. So you can see, this is the blue line. You can see that we've gone down, or that we went down during the pandemic. Oil prices actually, if you look at the barrel price, went negative for the first time, and obviously didn't stay there, but was a signal of, I think, concern about the pandemic. We paid very low prices last year historically, and are now creeping back up. As of October, the average price was, right around $3, $3.15. We're going to get the new numbers probably in a couple days. I paid $3.45 a gallon, as I'm sure I'm seeing heads nod that others paid around that as well. We're seeing on the right, that's propane prices. We're again starting to see that uptick. And then we publish this on our webpage, so people, when they shop, they can compare and look at prices around the country. We have it statewide, and then by region of the state. Next slide. So on electricity, you may have seen this chart before. This is from ISO New England. This is where our electricity is coming from in the region. So a few points here. All the way over to the left is early 2000. All the way over to the right is 2019. The black and gray are coal and oil. So the good news here is that we've drastically reduced the amount of coal and oil that our region is using for electricity, down to less than 1%, less than half a percentage point actually, depending on the year. So we've gone from 35% reliance on coal and oil down to less than half a percentage point as a region. A lot of reasons for that. The Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, these is helping drive this change. Market dynamics is helping drive this change. A lot of these plants were older and built in the 50s, 60s, and it was an opportunity to retire. The other piece is natural gas has become cheaper and has been more economical to invest in. And you can see that in the blue line up above, the blue bar up above, we are becoming, as we use less coal and oil, we are using more natural gas as a region. So that is obviously better from an emissions perspective than coal and oil, but does highlight the amount of natural gas that our system is using. Next slide. And when we look at the trends that we're seeing around the world for increased prices in oil and increased prices in natural gas, that chart on the left shows two things. One is the wholesale electricity prices. So the electricity prices that we're paying a region mapped next to natural gas prices at the New England hub. And you can see is a very close, if not direct correlation between the two, because we have become so reliant on natural gas that fuel price sets the wholesale electric price for the region almost every time. So what you can see is spikes, and particularly over the last 10 years in the winter, when natural gas needs to be used to heat homes, and we need to rely on other sources of energy to get electricity, particularly oil, and cold snaps in the winter, prices go up. Electricity prices also go up, and so you can see those trends being directly related. So maybe a little bit of good news here is that Maine, while the chart on the right shows average electric prices over the last decade, the gray bar is the US average, so we are above average. The green bar is Maine, and then the line, and then the blue line is New England. And so we have higher than average electricity prices when compared to the rest of the region. However, we have typically had the lowest prices in New England. So we are looking to see what will happen with the recent price increases from this winter, but we expect it'll be somewhat in line with this trend. Next slide. So what are we doing on it? So I think, we talked a lot about the thermal sector, heat pumps, the opportunity to do more electrification, to do incentivize more low carbon fuel sources. On the electricity side, top left chart, you're probably familiar with, our renewable portfolio standard requires 80% renewable energy by 2030. This is done by incentivizing what are known as Class 1 or new renewable resources. In Maine, thanks to the work of the legislature and the governor, we now have the highest RPS requirement in New England and one of the highest in the country. The top left chart is Maine is the purple bar or the purple line, and you can see that we are ambitious, aggressive, and moving forward with the 80% RPS. We are seeing, how are we meeting that? So we're doing that in a few ways. We are incentivizing or requiring large scale clean energy procurements done by our Public Utilities Commission. Over the last 18 months, we've signed up 14% of Maine's electric load for new clean energy resources. 20 to 25 new projects across Maine are in process of being developed in order to help us meet our 2030 requirement. These are requirements, these aren't goals, this will happen. The other thing I would add is our office did a report of, okay, how are we doing? Are we on track to meet this 2030 target? The report last year that we produced showed that we are good for around 2025, 2026, but we have a shortage of anywhere from 800 to 900 megawatts that are needed on top of what we've done. So the legislature last session passed LD 1710, which requires the PUC to do a procurement aimed at getting resources down from northern Maine to load centers in southern Maine. The PUC just put out the first RFP doc for that yesterday. At the same time, the legislature passed legislation around distributed generation, so smaller scale resources. And that top chart on the right is what you heard the governor say. We've gone from less than 70 megawatts in 2019 to 325 megawatts installed in 2021. The pipeline for that is, well over a gigawatt. And so you think about that gap that we have from 25 to 2030, it will be met by a mix of new large scale resources along with distributed or smaller scale resources. And then finally, the legislature set a goal of increasing energy storage in the state. We are actually just getting ready to, or have brought on a consultant to help complete a report about doing a market assessment for energy storage. And these are variable resources, wind, solar, these technologies, as we all know. So energy storage can play a really crucial role in helping us, reduce our dependency on fossil fuel. But we have a target of 300 megawatts by 2025 and 400 by 2030. The green bar there is operating. We've got around 50 megawatts installed in the state. The good news is we've got well over 400 megawatts in the potential pipeline to be installed. There's a 150 megawatt project, 125, 150 megawatt project planned in Gorham. There's a handful of 5, 10 megawatt projects across the state. So we are seeing through programs, policies, and really market forces, we're seeing more growth in all these targets. And I think the energy storage one is we're kind of an early period of growth there, but it's an exciting place to be. So I think that's my last slide. But wanted to present the context. There's, we have historical headwinds. We have opportunities for progress, but we are making progress both on the thermal side and the electricity side. So thank you. Oh, I had one more slide. You can applaud again in a second. So recognizing the price increases that were and how they would impact Maine's residents and businesses, our office worked closely with 5 or 6 different agencies across the state: Maine Housing, Efficiency Maine, PUC, OPA, others, to put together a resource guide to make sure that the information that of initiatives and resources are in one place. And so if anyone is looking for help or information, they can go to maine.gov/energy, and you will find this resource guide. There's a lot of incentives, a lot of funding available, in large part thanks to the influx of funding from federal government that Hannah's going to talk about. But there are resources there. So if people need help, if they need assistance, please direct them there, direct them to their local CAP agency, wherever. So thank you.
Keep clapping for Dan Burgess. So I'm not going to read all the words on these. I've got 4 slides. I just wanted to kick us off into some conversations with some understanding of the magnitude of opportunity we now have to implement new funds coming to Maine. And so this is the first one on clean transportation, our biggest area of emissions. And we are now seeing significant influxes from the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. I've already forgot what Bruce told me to call it. For public transportation, EV charging, broadband, additional competitive funds, which are really the funds we want to focus on and think about how we prepare Maine for those funds, as well as money from the Maine Jobs and Recovery Plan. Next slide. Buildings and efficiency. This is a long slide, and it's a fair amount of good news. Again, weatherization, energy efficiency, specific funds for training energy auditors in our state, funding that the governor talked about this morning for energy efficiency programs, affordable housing, as well as forest products innovation. So again, big opportunity on the buildings and efficiency. I will just say, about a year ago, when we launched the Maine Won't Wait plan, we were talking about a bond package that was about 1/10 the size of the funds you will see on these 4 screens. Next slide. Next, the clean energy sector. And I will say Dan has talked a lot about these, but again, funding for Dan's office, specific competitive funds for schools, which is exciting. Again, that will match well with the EV school buses. We are very focused on the workforce needed to accomplish what we need with clean energy. So a big project coming out of Dan's office in collaboration with a lot of other agencies around clean energy jobs. And again, specific funding to help Dan do all these reports and do all this work. Next slide. And last but not least, climate resilience. And again, I won't talk about this. I think you've heard about a lot of these funds today, but these are, again, significant and transformational funds. Most of them, the infrastructure funds last for about 5 years. Maine has until 2026 to spend our ARP funds, but a lot of those funds are urgently needed and will be spent in the next couple of years. And again, the state budget funds are usually in a 2-year cycle. So a lot of new opportunity. So I'm going to bring up Sarah Curran, and I think that we're framing Dan's opportunity and challenge of where we are. Maine is an outlier state in some ways. We have a long ways to go, but we also are moving rapidly in the right direction. We also have new, incredible funding opportunities, but funds that we really need communities and people and state government to rally, to spend efficiently, and to make the most progress possible. So that's going to frame our conversations. We're going to maybe have them be a little bit shorter, but maybe spend more time. I think we've got about 20 Climate Council members out on the internet who will be doing it via Zoom. But Sarah will set up how we're going to do it, and we're going to talk. Again, there's going to be group talking online and a couple groups talking in this room, and then we're going to report back. So Sarah, tell us what to do.
Thanks, Hannah. Hi, everyone. So we wanted to spend a little bit of time today with all of you reflecting a bit on sort of what the past year has meant and where things feel like they're moving right along and where they might be more challenging. And then also looking ahead at the next year and kind of where we need to lean in a little bit more and what is the work we want to focus on. And we thought that the comments from Dan and then thinking about the federal funding was kind of a nice way to usher in this conversation. So what I'd like to have us do is in the room, maybe split up into 3 groups of like 6 or 7 people. So stand up and just kind of rearrange ourselves. And online, I think Jess Scott is from GoPIF is one of the little boxes on there. She's going to help the Climate Council members who are participating via Zoom to break into a small group discussion there as well. And so we'll spend about 20 minutes talking in small groups, and then we'll come back and just kind of share a little bit what we talked about. I'll help you with the timing. So I'll tell you when you're about halfway, but we want to focus on 2 major topics. We want to focus on emissions reductions, and then we want to talk about resilience. And within each of those topics, I'd like to spend a few minutes reflecting on what's going well, what's challenging, and then also looking ahead. And so what do we need to do to ensure our success, to engage with stakeholders, and to meet the ambitious targets that we've set out? So we'll break up into small groups. We'll spend about 20 minutes in those groups, and then we'll come back and we'll invite each group to just share a couple of the things that they talked about. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, and I'll work with Jess and Cassie to see if we can get that group up and going. Again, welcome your patience as we sort of embrace this new hybrid meeting mode. And in the room, I'm thinking 3 groups will probably work best, so we can just rearrange ourselves. All right, well, you're in charge of one table. Ivan's in charge of the next table, and the other one can be over there with Representative Bloom. All right. So it's 3:15 right now, and we'll come back into plenary at 3:35. I'm going to bring us back to the large group discussion, please. Yeah, if each table could identify 1 or 2 people who are going to share sort of the highlights of that table's discussion, that would be great. And Cassie, who did you say there? It's Jesse. Okay, great. So I can't see the Zoom. I want to start with the folks who are in the Zoom room because I think it's the hardest to participate in this hybrid meeting through the Zoom. So I want to thank them for engaging in the small group discussion this way. And I hope it was a good conversation. Cassie tells me that Jesse Perkins and Melissa Law are going to report out from the Zoom conversation. So Jesse, do you want to go first?
I volunteered to report on our one takeaway from our conversation about emissions reductions. And I think we agreed that something that we might not have foreseen when we started this process a couple years ago is that electric vehicles seem cool now. Sure, if that was necessarily true, 2 to 3 years ago, but with the so many manufacturers announcing that they're going in that direction, we've got our new electric school bus, and then other districts are requesting such a thing, and with infrastructure improving all the time. Yeah, I'm not sure how many Mainers a couple years ago would say electric vehicles are starting to seem cool, but the all seems to be rolling in the right direction. And the state is setting a good example in that regard as well, from what I understand, with the number of agencies that are requesting and getting their fleets upgraded to electric. So great job to the state employees for setting that example.
Awesome. Thanks, Jesse. Melissa Law.
Hi, everyone. Let me just say that I think the hybrid model is working out really well. Thanks for letting us Zoom in to the meeting. One of the things that we were really excited about on the resilience side was to learn about the new community resilience program, and just to see it expand from a pilot project to a much bigger pool of funding for 100 communities to get support for climate assessment and adaptation is really exciting. So that's a huge step forward for community resilience here in Maine. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Melissa. Okay, so in the room, I'm going to go first to Representative Bloom's table. Do you have somebody who's going to report out from your table?
Lydia and Kate.
Lydia and Kate, great.
Well, one of the things on emissions reductions we thought was going well was the fact that we have a high RPS standard that is really helping to bring that forward to reduce our emissions. We found that, also we would like some more information on solar and how that's growing in terms of acreage. I don't see that reflected in this. That would be nice to know. And the other emissions reduction, some challenges is making sure that our solar policy is equitable. And that's still a challenge, even though we've made improvements to it. We still need to make better improvements. Would that be a more accurate way of saying what you're saying? Would you like to add something on the emissions reduction? Okay. On the resilience, yes, we agree. The community climate resilience plans metric is really, really good. And I guess what we should get is some kind of, we should have we should just list all the towns alphabetically and see where they are in the state, quite simply. That would be nice to know. And then I can approach some of my colleagues in the legislature to say, go to your towns and tell them that we're doing this and what tools are available. That's something for outreach. That might be something we could do. And that's one way we can engage more of the stakeholders is really speaking specifically about that metric. And what else?
Just building quickly on that, one thing you brought up was how important on the resilience side, communities working together. can be and really powerful, especially in Maine's communities, which are so under-resourced typically and don't have that kind of planning capacity. So the fact that this is coming out is really good. And your point about linking it to the legislature is great. And then building on something Melissa said, I think we were talking about how can we as a community in layperson's terms celebrate our renewable portfolio standard, which is so progressive and it clearly is driving change. And I don't know if that's too wonky, but it seems like something that's a place where we can lead outside of Maine. And I know through the Climate Alliance we do, but just wanted to give a plug for the wonky stuff.
That's great. Thank you, Kate. Thanks, Lydia.
As I hand it to Dan.
I'm gonna hand it to Ivan.
Thanks, Ivan.
Sure. Is this on? Yep. Yeah. So I'm just going to list some concepts that came up in the discussions and in the first area on emissions. I think one of the points was that the awareness relative to climate change and greenhouse gas emissions and the linkage between the two is kind of there. We're not fighting the tide of denial per se. It's just what does it mean for people and what do we do about it, which obviously is a big just. We talked about the issue of an energy policy getting ahead of the technology and the challenge of impact on energy prices. And of course, we've got a lot of expertise around the table in addressing that. The challenge of electrification and supply and the product itself. I still want to buy my EV pickup truck and I'm waiting. That it's a regional challenge. It's not just a Maine thing. So more than a lot of other issues that we're dealing with, this one is definitely regionalized. Heat pumps are obviously going well in Maine, and a big cheer for the efforts that are taking place and Michael Stoddard's leadership on that. We talked a little bit about moratoriums in towns on solar that are emerging and how that impacts the progression of solar going forward. Talked about issues around brownfields and landfills, both as a place to put solar and why that doesn't necessarily work as well as you might think off the bat. We talked a little bit about the natural gas that comes from those landfills and the potential there going forward. What am I missing on that one? We talked a little bit about bioenergy and some of the information and complexities around building out that component of the energy mix. On the resilience side, we talked about the exciting funding that's available and the engaging of communities. That was the first thing that everyone identified, and obviously has been repeated in other groups. Challenges around, this was obviously a discussion around coastal areas and the issue of retreat and the costs and the challenges that it's not a cookie cutter type of a need. It's very individualized and very expensive to do it. And we have a lot of coast and a lot of people live there. We talked a little bit about rural Maine, not just the coast, and what are the kinds of things that are impacting sort of border to border. And the energy plan stood out as impacting all communities and everyone that can both recognize it, feel good about it, and benefit from it. Talked a little bit about some of the challenges of relative to resilience of water issues, particularly having to do with agriculture and irrigation and how that's managed. Towns are, I guess this is sort of a positive that the towns are definitely appreciative and engaged on culverts, which has kind of been a mainstay of climate action even before we were acting on climate. And so even more so now. So what else? Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Thanks, Ivan.
Okay. Who's next?
Who's talking from this table? Thanks, Michael.
I think I should turn my back on my fellow colleagues in the room so that the people who are online can hear us. Okay, so we filibustered away most of our time talking about emissions, but we did get to resilience a little bit. We remarked on the consensus that we've enjoyed both among policymakers and the public and the business community around the importance of these climate change issues and the need to take action on it. And that's been a welcome change from maybe 10 or 20 years ago when that wasn't there. And so getting the support to approve policies or take actions and run programs is much more favorable now. And of course, we have been really fortunate to get the amount of funding allocated towards some of these activities that when we were debating these policies and recommendations as a council a year ago, we didn't know that this funding would be available and we were worrying where it was going to come from. So at least for the foreseeable future, for the next few years, we're going to be really lucky to have as much funding as we do. We talked about other things going well, the state's initiative getting launched now to lead by example in both some of the vehicles that they are going to drive and the charging stations at their buildings and the design of new construction or renovations that they're doing is exciting progress. Pat talked a little bit about the industrial sector and their increased focus on the fuels that they're using to run their businesses. And so that all seemed promising and going well. Challenges we spent a lot of time identifying. At the top of the list was supply chain challenges. If we're thinking about actions for improving buildings, all those building materials are more expensive. The workforce to do that work is a little bit short right now. And so there's a lot of strain on that, and that's driving prices up and costs up, which is just making everything more difficult. And the same is true with vehicles. The entire industry of vehicles is really struggling with supply chain issues. And so I think what we realize is we just need to be patient, among other things. I mean, not only is this a long range plan that we're talking about and it's a marathon, but we're all geared up to do things right now and we're all excited to do it. But this next year is going to be, we think, particularly challenging. So we might have to be a little patient on that. And we noted also one of the challenges is sort of making sure that things are working from a perspective of both rural and urban viewpoints. And we can see some things that are working pretty well, like the heat pump market penetration is really good in rural Maine, and that's a good thing. So that's an example of where it seems to be working everywhere and there's buy-in everywhere. It's going to be a bit of a struggle still, it seems, with electric vehicles. That may be longer to the models that are available right now may not work as well in a rural setting as in an urban setting. So again, we may have to be a little bit patient for the marketplace to come along and make that more balanced. And then when we talked about resilience, there were, we noted that there are more resources than we've had in the past, thanks to some of these federal funds, and that's going to be really helpful. And there seems to be a greater awareness than in the past of the need for these things, and the presentations we've heard today certainly help with raising that awareness. And obviously, there was some good news today with the launch, the announcement of the Community Resilience Partnership to provide support for municipalities, because I think technical support is going to be something that people need when it comes to figuring out what it's going to take to build up our resilience over the long term. The challenges are sort of self-evident. I think that these things are pretty pricey. It's expensive. It's hard to know where all the funds are going to come from. They're complex challenges. And it's a very long time horizon. And we're not great as a society at planning out things that take decades to figure out. So that's just going to make it harder. So those were some of the things we talked about.
Thanks, Michael. A lot of similarities running through the conversations at the different tables. We have a couple of minutes before I want to turn it back over to our co-chairs to kind of wrap us up and move us along. Any final thoughts or reflections that folks want to share just after hearing what the other tables were talking about? Yeah, Judy.
Thanks, Brian. Sorry, I'm stuck in my earring. So one of the things that we didn't talk about that I just wanted to underline from the tour this morning at the Advanced Composites Center, I felt like I was walking into the future, and I was so inspired by what we saw in that tour in terms of the use. They're working on an entirely wood sourced, even the polymer stuff, they're still working on that, of a house from a digital printer, a 3D printer. They're working on that over there right now, as well as a whole bunch of other things. And if anyone hasn't been on that tour, you absolutely have to go. It was so inspiring in terms of reducing emissions and using our natural resources from Maine to do amazing things. So that just hasn't been said yet, and I had to say it out loud.
That's great. Thank you, Judy. Any other thoughts or? Oh. Was there someone from the Zoom room who wanted to comment? Probably hand up is the easiest way, if you can do that. Okay. Anybody else in the room? Representative Bloom.
I just wanted to say about the regionalization, and I was very pleased to hear that a lot today from the governor and in other things talking about people getting together. And from being in Glasgow, we talked, I was part of a whole consortium of other state legislators. And we talked about states working together. And one area that we thought we could work together on is electric vehicle charging stations, like in New England, like following the Reggie kind of example. Not sure how it could be done, but I think that that's one of the things that we could do in New England is to expand what we're doing here in the state. Is my point.
Thank you.
And we should think of other things that we can do regionally with the other New England states as well.
Thank you. Okay, thank you all very much. I'm going to turn it over to our co-chairs to wrap us up for the day.
Routine.
Well, I just would like to thank everybody for your participation today, both in person and online, particularly for those members who participated online and for the helpful feedback about it actually working in a hybrid setting. That's really exciting. And I just wanted to note that I'm always impressed by the breadth and variety of expertise of this group. When we get together and we have conversations like the ones that we just had, it gives me a lot of hope for the work that we're doing moving into the future. I think we've highlighted that there's a lot that's been accomplished and still an awful lot left to be done. And so our mission is not over. And I really appreciate all of you committing your time and your energy to the work that we're doing. So I'll turn it over to Hannah.
I have very little to add, but I will just say, hopefully you can all see on your screens the schedule for our upcoming meeting. So we're meeting again Wednesday, February 9th, probably on the internet. We're sort of unveiling here the Thursday, May 12th. This is our hopeful date for some kind of conference, probably in the Augusta area. So we will certainly keep everybody posted. Obviously, the state of the world and everything else will play into how that plays out. And you can see the schedule for the meetings for the rest of the year. So just want to echo again, Melanie's thanks. I will say at our February meeting, our equity subcommittee has been hard at work. They will be reporting back recommendations, a whole suite of recommendations to the Climate Council. Those will then go to the working groups for consideration. And that does remind me, Amanda brought it up, but our working groups are continuing to meet and they are diving deep into the areas where we are now implementing. So I just want to thank the folks out there and the co-chairs in the room who are continuing that work. The working groups meet at least twice a year. Most working groups are meeting a couple more times than that, but just sort of shows we have 6 working groups, 2 subcommittees. We have hundreds of people in the state. We have lots of people who tune in for these meetings. So people care a lot about climate action. They are paying attention. And again, to the 39 members of the Maine Climate Council, including our 2 new members, I would just really, again, we continue to be grateful to your commitment. I think you all know how important it is. And with that, please just stay in touch, and we'll see you all on Wednesday, February 9th. Thanks.